Welcome back to the Pistons Jack YouTube channel. On today's episode, we'll talk about the ripple effects of the Fred VanVleet injury and how that could potentially affect the Pistons roster this season. We'll also touch on the ESPN's top 100 players list, who was snubbed, who made the list, and a whole lot more in just a moment. A couple of days ago, Shams from ESPN announced that Fred VanVleet had torn his ACL, a massive blow to the Houston Rockets and their title contention. And with where the Rockets are at in acquiring 37-year-old Kevin Durant, there's not really a position for them to sit tight and, lose such a crucial starting point guard and just wait until next season for him to get healthy. Obviously, they got Reed Shepherd, but off the back of this injury, it's triggered a lot of discussion around the NBA on what guard and point guard, ball handling guard, could the Rockets go out and try and acquire for the upcoming season to ensure that they can compete with OKC and the Denver Nuggets of the world for an NBA championship, especially coming out of the West. And before I propose this potential trade, this is not something that I have seen a lot of Pistons fans throwing out per se. Certainly not something I was thinking about, but Sarah from the Pistons Jack community brought this up with me in DMs over on Instagram, and she said there's been a lot of discussion from Rockets fans on Jaden Ivey and how they could potentially acquire him. So we've put together a trade here. And this is a trade that Rockets fans have been throwing out over on Reddit. So no reporting on this, so Pistons fans don't freak out. This is more just an interesting discussion because I actually think, before I show the trade, I actually think Jaden Ivey on this Rockets team would be a pretty perfect fit. Now, Ivey obviously isn't a lead point guard, but I think what I like about the Rockets is Amen Thompson can clearly be a ball handling guard. They want him to get more reps. You can get playmaking through Şengün. So Ivey, whilst he would be in theory the starting point guard on this team with Fred VanVleet out, I think he would still play that scoring guard role he plays alongside Cade, and he'd be doing so alongside Kevin Durant with the most least defensive attention I think he's ever got in his NBA career, because he would be behind the pecking order. I would say a man would pick up the team's best perimeter defender or KD, and then a man will get the second, maybe Ivey gets the third. So I think Ivey on this Rockets team, he would really flourish. And obviously I don't want to lose Ivey. I love Ivey. I think he's due for a huge season this year with the Pistons. But I thought this was just a fun discussion because this is a team I could see Ivey really flourishing on in the Rockets. So as you can see on the right here, the trade we've got here is Tari Eason for Jaden Ivey. Now, a couple of notes before we start talking about this deal a little bit more. This deal, a straight swap for these two would not go through. The Rockets need to send out another $3 million on top of Eason's 5.6 to avoid the hard cap. But in order to do so, the players they can add, like Aaron Holiday, Jeff Green, or someone else on a vet minimum, they can't do so until mid-December. So this type of trade is probably not able to happen immediately, which maybe that means there's no chance of the Rockets being interested in a trade with the Pistons for Jaden Ivey. But I wanted to note that due to all their veteran minimum guys re-signing this offseason, they can't be traded until the 15th of December per Spot Track. But if this trade were to happen, the reason I'm discussing this is simply because we spend a lot of time over on this channel and on other podcasts I've been on and in the fan base talking about who's the future four of this team. And Tari Eason might be the kind of player that could fit that future four role for the Pistons. He's 6'8", 7'3" wingspan. He, in only 25 minutes a game last year, or 24 minutes, mainly off the bench, was 12.6 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 1.7 steals, 1 block, shot 49% from the field, 34% from three, and 76% from the line. Now, the big thing here is 34% from three won't cut it. That won't cut it with how this Pistons roster projects with starting Jalen Duren and Asar Thompson. But He shot 36% on catch and shoots last season from three. If he can get that number to like 38 and really, you know, become a reliable knockdown shooter, especially from the corners. Whilst I'm not sure I would do this trade just with Ivy for Eason, but just say Eason ends up on the Pistons in restricted free agency next year somehow, and they bring him in. Like what he brings defensively on the boards, his energy, that would be a pretty nice fit with JB Bickerstaff's defensive system and the culture the Pistons have here. I think the thing with Eason that's plagued him, apart from some injury concerns. He played 57 games last year, 82 as a rookie, 22 games in his second season. So he's had some injury issues for sure. I think the other thing that plagues him is I think he can be a guy that goes out, plays at a really high tempo, can have some have some turnovers where he's forcing it, but he's an all-out energy guy. And I think like he would kind of fit the culture in Detroit pretty well if they were able to acquire him at some point in the future, if it's not for this idea we're proposing. But the other thing is Eason was in the same draft as Ivy, so he's extension eligible right now. So whilst you'd be sending out Ivy, who has an extension to be signed, you'd be bringing back a player who needs an extension. So that's the trade idea. Like I said, no reporting on this. This was more just a fun discussion to have and something that has been going on over on Rockets Reddit. And so let me know your thoughts. Eason for Ivy, would you do it? And then forgetting the Ivy element, is Tari Eason a player you'd like to see the Pistons target next year in restricted free agency if he doesn't sign a extension with the Rockets? But the second segment we're going to talk about today and the final one is ESPN's top 100 list. They released part 1 and part 2 over the past 2 days. And in the 100 to 51 ranked players, Jaden Ivey and Tobias Harris came in at 84 and 85, as you can see on the right. And I was a bit surprised, to be honest. I didn't expect Tobias to be in this top 100, although I think he is quite underrated, not just by Pistons fans, but the NBA in general, especially with what he did last year. So it was nice to see him get some love. I think when you look at the on-off numbers for Tobias last year, the Pistons were a way better team with him on the court. And a lot of that is because he is the perfect archetype of player that you want at the 4. Obviously, he's 32, 33 years old, so this is the position I need to address in the future the most. But with what he brings current day, last season and this season, I think he is a top 100 player. Ivy at 85 as well. I think a lot of Pistons fans expected Asar Thompson to make this list, and to see Ivy over him, I think, shocked a lot of people. When you zoom out and kind of think of it and think about the people who vote on these things and from a national standpoint, I don't think when they look at it, you look at Asar and I think projecting he's a top 100 player for sure this season, but when you only played 22 minutes last year, only played half the season, I can see why they've gone with Ivy, who's been in the league the extra season, had career highs as a scorer and as a shooter last season. Although cut short, I'm not surprised to see him ranked here. Jalen Duren was the other player I think a lot of fans were a little bit upset about, but I think JD, similarly to Asar, with the position he plays, especially at center, I wasn't surprised not to see him on this list, because if he shows what he did the last 5 months of the season, then I think he'll definitely be on here next season. But I wasn't too shocked. A little surprised just to see Asar not in there, because he seems to be, by most people, national media and amongst the Pistons community, the second most kind of excited prospect on the team. But when you do just look at what each player's proven in their career to date, I can't really fault ESPN too much. And that brings us to the last Pistons player on the list, was Cade Cunningham, who jumped up 55 spots from last season all the way to number 12 on the top 100 players list, which I knew he would obviously be clearly in the top 50. I thought ESPN would probably have him like late teens, early 20s. I think to see him at 12 was pretty crazy. As you can see on the right, he was ahead of Evan Mobley, who was 13th, Anthony Davis, 14, Donovan Mitchell, 15th, Devin Booker, and Paolo Banchero. So I thought Donovan Mitchell, that was the biggest surprise there, that he was ahead of him. And to a lesser extent, Anthony Davis. But Mitchell in particular, I thought would definitely be ahead of Cade from like ESPN standpoint. From my standpoint, I think 12's a very good ranking for him. I think he can push into that top 10 this season with another season like last year, but and a strong playoff series this season. But I was surprised to see him get this much love. So cool to see that. Ultimately, we all know these lists don't mean really anything, especially with Cade being 67th last year. I think the one everyone's talking about from this year's ranking is Zion being at 61, but at the same time, you can always kind of see how they do these lists. Like Zion just hasn't really played a whole lot in the last 4 years or for most of his career, and like the talent is clearly there, but at some point, how many games you play has to factor into your ranking, and your availability. So that's going to do it for today's show, guys. Let me know your thoughts on Tari Eason, on that trade proposal. Like I said, I'm not sure I would do that, but Rockets fans are interested in that, and I thought it was an interesting thing to discuss. Yeah, any thoughts on the top 100? I'd love to hear from you all. But until next time, thank you so much for watching. Go Pistons.